Okay, well, there's enough of us here. I think I will call the Board Education and Business Committee meeting for Tuesday, May 24th to order. Trustee Hutchins has sent his regrets, and Trustee Croft will be a few minutes late getting here. I want to respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the Coast Salish people's land and traditional territories where we're privileged and lucky enough to live, work, play, and do our Zoom meetings. Could I have somebody please adopt the agenda? Trustee DeGroot, seconded by, perfect, Trustee Doman. And all those in favor? And we have a few minutes here. We have the minutes of the April 14th special BEBC meeting. Can somebody move to accept those? Trustee Spilsbury and Trustee Doman, all those in favor? And the minutes of the April 26th BEBC meeting. Trustee DeGroot, Trustee Doman, all those in favor? And lastly, the minutes of the 28th Special Board Education and Business Committee meeting. Trustee DeGroot and Trustee Spilsbury, and all those in favor. Great. That takes us to our action list, which I believe Mr. Sandquist will be looking after for us.
Thank you. I'll just bring it up. There it is. There were two items on the action list. The first item is still in the expiration, and that was around celebratory funds for schools. So hopefully we'll have something on that shortly. And the other item was the prepare the 2022-2023 annual budget in accordance with the information that was presented at April 26th, and it was adopted by the board at the May board meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no petitions and delegations, am I correct about that? Okay, we move on to our education part of our program. Have we got the principal of Quamachin, Nicole, in our waiting room? Can we bring her in if we do, please? Welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Good to see you. We're looking forward to hearing what your school plan is all about.
Yeah, so here I'm Nicole Boucher, the principal at Quamachin, and beside me is Claire Whitney, the future principal of Quamachin. So we're going to share sort of some of the work that we have been doing here over the past many years, and the kind of the living document right now is the school plan that we will share, and we'll just share the highlights with you. It's actually quite long, so we're going to skim and give you some tidbits and then take some questions from you. So this school plan is sort of our living document, and it's sort of a summary of all of the work that we do, and it was co-created with our entire staff, including our educational assistants. So we're quite proud of the plan, and I think that's why it is so kind of robust. It's ambitious, but we plug away. It's not just a one-year plan, it's a few years plan, and it gets revised every year. So just the quick introduction. I think most of you are familiar with our school, but we are grade 8 and 9. This year we have 610 students in 25 divisions. Our grade 8s are teamed, so they've got just a few core teachers and they have their courses all year. Grade 9s enjoy a semestered system where they get to choose some electives. And the things that we are the most proud of about our school here is that our staff understands the value of relationships, and they understand, they're all trauma trained. So we did a lot of work over the past 5 years around trauma-informed training and really ramped it up again this year as a big refresher. We really enjoy celebrating at our school all the time. Last week, there was a big grade 9 boys against the staff basketball game, and the gym was full of kids cheering because we can now. So we like to come together and celebrate. We like to create a sense of community here. And I think one of the things we've reflected on and we're most proud of is that we bring our whole school together, whether it's virtually or in classrooms or in and around the same themes. So something we do as a school is we offer whole school lessons on a very regular basis. So we tackle a lot of topics as a school, and through the whole school lessons that are developed by usually a little committee of teachers. Sometimes one teacher has a great idea and they roll with it. is that the whole school gets the same rollout of information at the same time and sort of the same language. So we do school lessons at least once a month, I'd say, hey. And themes are like inclusion, anti-racism, truth and reconciliation, SOGI, anti-homophobia, biphobia, transphobia. We did a huge piece last year on homelessness. And so we kind of revisit things every 1 to 2 years because it's such a turnaround here. We talk a lot about healthy relationships. So we do lots of whole school work there. We have 5 big events every year that our whole school attends together. So the whole school goes up and over Mount Zuhalem, and we do a hike and we do a barbecue and a celebration. We're going to do some canoe races in a few weeks as a whole school. We're going to go to Parksville as a whole school. So yeah. And every month the whole school gets out and runs 5K together. So we do lots of things as a team. So there is that kind of the sense of team. The other neat thing about our school is we have 8 elementary feeder schools that come together and get to know each other just for 2 years with us. So it's kind of a wild ride, but we love it. Right now we call it Transition Palooza. We're in the middle of getting to know all of our future grade 8s, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. And we were just, Claire was at Alexander this afternoon. I was there a few weeks ago. They were here last week. So a lot of work to transition our kiddos. And I think other things I'd like to say will probably come into us sharing about our actual goals and strategies. And something else we love about our school, the kids are so close in age, there's not really a hierarchy. So you can be a leader in the 8th grade just as much as the 9th grade. And sometimes our grade 8s are a lot more mature than some of our grade 9s just because they are only a year apart. When I first came to the school 6 years ago, I thought, oh my God, how will you ever get to know these kids in such a short amount of time? And it was really daunting, and the staff here managed to do that. So we just had a meeting with Cow High, and our teachers spoke so well and so eloquently about our kids. And I could go on and on, but I think we've got a bit of a time limit. So biggest thing here is we're working with sweet little teenagers who they have that underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, and we know this about them. So we work with that with them, right? We expect certain behaviors, and we expect them to be beautiful works in progress because they're just learning and trying to figure it out. And I think we're proud of our kids because we were just praising them today. We did a Zoom assembly with our school. Every 2 weeks we do a Zoom assembly. We just sort of chat with the kids, but we were really praising them for being such a responsive group. And they're good little learners. So I think Claire is going to share the first few goals with you, and probably we're just really going with highlights. Hey,
Yeah. So I think our first goal really is looking at having numeracy diagnostic assessment and making sure that what we're doing is culturally inclusive. So currently right now we're looking at how to gather that data and really look and reflect where the numeracy skills are and abilities of our students, and how to best target that moving forward in a really supportive way. And that's work coming together as a staff and working with the kids and hearing their voices, and then working as well, looking at the information from our transitions and making sure that as they land, that they're supported here at Quamachin. So ensuring that the supports that they've had in elementary are mirrored here. So how best to do that. And that's also the same thing that we're doing with our literacy skills. And so we actually have had the benefit of having direct reading instruction happening here this year, and are hopeful to be able to continue offering that and enhance it moving forward to next year. And that work too will be looking at the learners that are transitioning in who are currently receiving literacy support in elementary, and to mirror as much as we can that same support here at Quamachin. This is an essential building block to building success for students, and it's one that we're dedicating time and effort into ensuring that we do a really good job on that transition and have that support running throughout on the continuum of their learning. So as they transition out of Quamachin and move on to Cow High, also working with their transition team on ensuring that those supports are in place for them too. So all part of the stages of our learners.
Do you want to hit this one too?
Sure. Infusing instruction in daily school life with our Indigenous and cultural content. So how to build a school culture that reflects the cultural practices of our Indigenous learners. And so this is working closely with First Peoples principles of learning. And then ultimately really ensuring that we have the support of the families, the community, and that we understand and acknowledge that the land that we're learning on for all of our learners and how culturally rich and significant this is, and embedding that into our daily school practice. And again, it's that reflection that students can see of their culture in their learning environment. And this is a work in progress, but it's exciting work. It's work that is done with our families, it's work done with our Sowetans, as well as working with our Indigenous educator and bringing in community voice and opportunity. And we had an exciting proposition to have an elder coming and working with our school closely for next year and looking for those opportunities to bring more of an inclusive community of culture here for all of our learners at Quamachin.
Yeah. Do you want to just speak to the strength of the position of the Soughton, just because I think it's worth mention?
Yeah, it's been absolutely shifting, having our Sowetans who work with our grade 6 and 7 students, but then come and travel with them while they're here at Quamachin, and then also as they go through to Cowichan Secondary. So they know these learners, they are connected to their families, and that knowledge that they bring with them about the learner and their family has just been invaluable. They're present for all of our meetings that have to do with IEP. If there's any sort of conversation that needs to happen, they're there hand in hand with us, working with the family, and it's just incredible support. And I can't imagine ever doing this job without them. And so thankful for having that vision that someone put place to have this happen. It's been incredible. And yeah, so thankful.
Yeah. And I think just to piggyback on that vein, I think what we try to model and try to do as an admin team and as a school is really walk in reconciliation. So we do a lot of work school-wide around truth and reconciliation, and we try not to make it sort of a token activity or token event. We try to live it throughout the course of the school year, and I think we're getting better and better. And even in kind of guiding us to program for our students for next year, we really listen to the voices of our Indigenous children, their parents, and our Southtons to, do right by those kids first and foremost. So we're feeling really good about that piece right now moving forward. And then another goal, we're almost done with the goals that our staff and team came up with is one thing that came up for staff was sort of around helping students move through the process of switching to CSL, communicating student learning from letter grades, and just noticing that these kiddos went from, they kind of had this culture of, well, I'm going to pass anyway. So sort of how to make learning really meaningful and relevant to them, and how to help them understand that the performance scales are really, really relevant and really meaningful. So a lot of work was done last year and into this year with our students to really make sure that they understand why learning is meaningful, why learning is important, and how assessment dovetails into that piece. And some of our strategies are in and around kind of having a nice high bar for everybody, but meeting them where they're at, helping everybody understand proficiency skills and core competencies, really teaching students strategies to help them focus. And our trauma-informed training came into that too. So a lot of sort of self-regulation, even at this level, I should say, not even, especially at this level, is very important. And teaching kiddos strategies that build resilience, and our school-wide lessons tailor to that as well. And just making sure students have that metacognitive piece of why am I here and why does it matter? And why is it important for me to be successful? And, we know that all kids want to learn, so helping shine a light on that piece and giving them a strong sense of what their learning means to them and what it's all about. And our last goal, I think, our school is about safety, relationships, and having fun. So our staff said, can we have a goal around, keeping kids safe, having great relationships, and having fun? And so that was kind of the fun piece. And that's where the staff came up with, whole school lessons around inclusion, empathy, respect, cooperation, making sure that we have as much family involvement as we can, which has been challenging this last few years. But, making sure that all kids are a part of the recycling program, making sure that there's sort of ownership around making our school a vibrant community that includes everybody. And then our staff, really very ambitious in a good way. We should have a mascot. We should have house teams. We should have, a field trip every month, and just the very ambitious, wonderful things that we've been able to pull a little bit of and keep building on. So we do a lot of those little school things. We do, a thing called Try It Tuesdays sometimes, where each staff member will host a different club or activity that no one's really done before, like birding or, some kind of a weaving or anything, karaoke, recording, and the kids just choose their Try It Tuesday activity and sort of off they go. And because I think are a school that does a lot of those whole school things, it's quick. We can say, let's do this whole school Try It Tuesday, and they put it together and they go for it. So, one day we'll get back to, the staff wanted movie nights and dances and open mic night, and those things haven't happened because of COVID limitations, but we're moving out of that now. So we'll start to see more and more of that happening. And a beautiful piece about Quamachin is that if you came in and saw our welcome board, there's 7 different activities happening here between teams and clubs, and that's just on a Tuesday. So there's just so much going on. There's kids playing lacrosse down in the south end. We've got kids mountain biking right now. We've got kids rock climbing at Climbing Club. We had our leadership kids meet today. We have a drop-in art today, choir today, dance today. All things just in one building for kids, and that never slowed down for us through the pandemic, which is a testament to the teachers here who, obviously live and breathe that idea that relationships are important and connectedness is important. So that's kind of it. And we were kind of looking at the plan that was, this story was from last year, but talking about that sort of our story is beyond, and what we shared was, and it's not the happiest thing to share, but the 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, I think, was announced in the news on a Friday night or a Saturday. And by Sunday, the whole staff knew we were having a Zoom. Dolly was a part of it. Kirby Edwards was a part of it. And this is a school where, when things matter the most, people come together very quickly and make things happen. And, staff they're happy to drop all the normal things for the things that matter the most and really get behind the things that are the most important. And just that, gathering everyone together. And I think part of our story ended with the last day of school. We didn't have those big gatherings. We couldn't go en masse to Parksville, but we got everyone in the school outside in a giant circle, and Cinquoa dancers came and presented, and they danced and danced and danced, and the kids were happy to just not even have them stop. And just the cheering and the celebrating and the joy of the kids with these dancers was a really powerful and special way to end the year. And we've been able to emulate more of that this year because we've been allowed to gather. So I think as we move away from those restrictions, it's just going to keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing. It makes me just want to come spend a few days there. I'd love to see that whole school learning environment. I think it would be very remarkable to be a part of. Do trustees have any questions? It was so well presented. Oh, do we have one?
I'd like to thank you ladies for remembering. It's so important to us to know that you cared enough to stop what you're doing and represent what is very important to the people of this nation. And I think you're on the right track. I was impressed with what you're teaching and changing some of the history. That's the most important class. The rest of the school, we can all relate to, but the history part, that's what has to change. So for that, I thank you for what you presented today.
Okay. Any other trustees have a comment? Thank you. I'll just repeat what Joe says. He said it so beautifully. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing with us. We really love to hear from our schools. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was just thinking we appreciate working for a school board and in a district that allows us and gives us permission to do the work that we do and to, not be the most, say, versed in any one area, but we have permission to try and take risks and reach out to the right people. So we thank all of you.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We then move on to 6.2, which is our catalyst update. So Claire, could we promote Ms. Van Dorian? Oh, there you are. Welcome.
Well, Siamnesia. Good to see you all. I'm going to share screen just because this is the way I roll. I'm a visual person and I appreciate you all for playing along with me. Okay. Do you see presenter view or the other view? Do I need to swap?
You're good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Kemmler. Well, I have had so much fun over the last few years overseeing Catalyst Learning Enhancement for our district. And what I'd like to share with you today is what our goals were set out to be for this year, as well as what we accomplished this year. As you know, in Catalyst, we have representatives from each school. So there's a Catalyst teacher, and working together, we come up with plans of what is our learning enhancement going to look like and sound like for the year. You know that we've had an interesting last couple of years with COVID, so that has changed the traditional look of what Catalyst looks and feels like. But you know what's neat is when that happens, it allows for you to switch and adjust what you would actually do in Catalyst. So at the beginning of the year, we were very cautious when we were making out our plans, but then we moved forward. So let's just share you. For example, this was our plan that we wanted to set out for the year. Now, our plans, what was different about it from what our traditional pieces were, is traditionally Catalyst would have the whole district come together and you have your schools come together in one location, perhaps, to have a learning experience. But what we have been doing over the last couple of years is creating school-based pieces. And then there are those pieces where the district comes together, but it just looks and sounds a little bit different. So when we created this plan, our goal was to have a variety of grade levels represented here. We wanted to have intermediate, secondary, and primary, because what we noticed was that sometimes our catalysts seemed to really be around that intermediate based kind of grades 4 to 7 kind of area. And then we found kind of outliers of secondary and primary and kind of said, oh, that's not for us. You know, that's not what we usually do. So this year, we really wanted to create things on purpose that would bring our secondary level in and bring our primary teachers into the learning. Some new additions this year on this list, because you may, from what we've done before, we always have a chess tournament. We'd have also, what we usually do is young authors, but that happens every other year. We have a drama challenge. Like, these are the traditional events that we had. But what we added this year was something neat. We added what was called a STEM challenge. So that was basically what ended up being, now this was a draft that we had at the beginning of the year, but it ended up being a primary STEM challenge. And that really brought our primary teachers into the learning. And we provided things on a monthly basis for them to do. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more as we get into this presentation. But what can we do to support our teachers in their schools to create learning enhancements in their room? It doesn't have to be an event. It's something that can happen every day if it wanted to. So we had a committee that created primary STEM challenges that were shared monthly, and they got to do that. Similarly, we had an outdoor land-based learning piece that was monthly shared for teachers to do. So what we're trying to do is create that confidence with our teachers to do these things that they might be leaning away from because they don't know much about. So it was a sharing of that in that sense. And as usual, we work, recently we've been working really well with careers, because careers has so many amazing activities that offer things to students. Students don't all learn the same way. Some of them like to have a hammer in their hand and create and build. So we helped that by having our Catalyst teachers working in our schools, sharing resources with our staff so that the staff could actually build the cars. And then we would have the careers team come in and finalize it with the races for gravity cars, as well as all of our bird houses and all sorts of things. So anyways, that was our plan. And we wanted it to go across the year, of course, so you had something to look forward to. So the learning experiences, this is the fun part. I'm going to share some pictures from what has happened in our district. Firstly, we had, School-based chess. Oops, sorry, I clicked it twice. School-based chess. So weekly chess clubs were happening in our buildings. Kids were, and they looked differently depending on what school it was. But kids were in there practicing chess, learning different skills, different moves, playing each other. And as you can see, some of our kiddos are wearing masks still because that's what was happening at the beginning of the year sometimes. And what I love about these images is you can see the range of ages, especially the bottom one is our secondary school here. I think this one's from Cal High. And so what we supported was our school-based chess tournaments. So we had buttons created and any school that needed them to offer them as prizes and awards were given them. It looks like here at Cal High, they offered the buttons as well as some swag. It looks like they had different prizes that they had for their school-based chess tournament. What's neat about this is that each school had their own community celebrate. They celebrated on their own in their own way. And they shared with us how it went. And it was just kind of neat. Now we miss having all the kids together in the same building. It's always traditionally at Maple Bay, you'd have every student in the district that's in chess would come and compete against each other. We're hopeful we can come back to that, but currently we had them as school-based and it still worked really well. Another piece, drama challenge. So once again, we weren't able to have all of our schools come together in one location. So we had our students submit video submissions of their whatever the drama challenge was. And this year, our drama challenge was a camping experience. Something bad happens when you go camping. So the kids were creating all sorts of things there. And they had lots of fun because they could create this in any way they wanted to. Some were outside, some were inside, some were in the gym. Some of them performed it for their own schools. And then we had medals distributed to the winning players, which was great. So they were able to receive those awards and feel really good about themselves. So it was really neat. We had a grade 4, we had a junior competition as well as a senior. So we would look at lower grades, primary and intermediate upper level. So that was lots of fun. Waiting for the slide to change. So this is that outdoor piece we talked about. So the new learning experience was every month there would be something that would allow and support our schools and teachers to learn outside, leaning on some land-based and forest school pedagogy, which I thought was really neat. We were just trying to discover this together. We sent our schools monthly outdoor education learning experiences and they could try it out. We hope to provide this monthly lens for teachers. And like I said, to support them so they feel confident in these different learning spaces. Sometimes we kind of get boxed into our classroom and we don't think of what's outside and beyond those walls. So it was really neat to embed that kind of pedagogy in their everyday learning. So it doesn't have to be a one-off. It's something that you do. And it actually ended up beginning to be routines in some of the classrooms, whether it's Forest Fridays or Wilderness Wednesdays, or they'd go outside and have that piece. Another one I mentioned earlier was the primary STEM. So similar to the outdoor education, we shared these, and they were challenges that they could do at a class level. Maybe you could have it as a mini school level, whatever it was. Maybe they could do it with a buddy class, whatever it was, the learning was there and we supported our teachers on things that they could do. And we tried to make them seasonal, to kind of match what was happening. Primary classes, trying to get them involved and realizing that learning enhancement is for all grades. It doesn't have to be just for intermediate or secondary. And this is what I mentioned about the careers department. So working together with them, we had every school building gravity cars this year. And as you know, I believe the teams all went to the sports track and they all got to celebrate with the winners. So this is just the beginning step is firstly, you got to build the cars. So sometimes teachers feel a little worried about, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do that. I can't support building in my classroom. So our Catalyst teachers were showing all the wonderful resources that the careers team has online that has videos that help support teachers for building. And then the principals just have to get the supplies from Ryan Goff and then it goes to their school, the teachers are building, and then the team would come and race the cars and find the winners. So we like to work hand in hand with the careers department. So next steps, well, Every year, I love it. It's like we have those items that we always do, like chess, drama, but I love discovering different ways to add learning enhancement. And every year it kind of morphs and evolves. And I'm looking forward to next year to see what we can do. I'm also looking forward to us all being together again. So maybe some of the school-based items will lend into us all coming together as a district and being at a school together. I'm hopeful that's what happens, because it's nice to celebrate together and the kids feel that sense of ownership when they can represent their school and be around others. So I hope that next year we can bring that more into our Catalyst learning enhancement. But one thing is our Catalyst group is full of appreciation for the support from the district that allows us to collaborate and bring these learning experiences to life. So we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have a supportive group that you are. So have I ended the share? Let me see.
Not quite.
Not quite, sorry. I'm hitting buttons and there we go. So thank you so much. I appreciate being able to share that all with you. And I hope you enjoyed seeing all the pictures of our kiddos, because you weren't able to come to our big district events to see it. And I'm hopeful that next year we can have that.
Thank you. That was really very informative. I was able to, with Trustee Croft, attend the Gravity Car Challenge and see the robots last week. And it was so much fun to see the kids. You know, we really, thanks to the COVID and everything that we've been going through, miss that, really miss. But it's encouraging to hear you share that none of it stopped. We just haven't got to go see. So thank you very much for your share. And Trustee DeGroot.
You said that you were going to, that the Young Authors is every other year. What about Poetry Slam?
Yes, you know, Poetry Slam, and that was something we wanted to do. And every year we try to discuss, and, you know, with our Catalyst teachers, we look forward to seeing what expertise is in the group, because the group kind of morphs and changes itself. And this year, unfortunately, we didn't have anyone feeling confident with doing that, so it didn't happen. And I was grateful to see Charlie Coleman had shared a Poetry Slam kind of opportunity for the district. So I was like, oh, thank goodness, because those are those pieces, again, where you want to lean on it. And I forgot to mention too, because we didn't have a Young Authors year this year, we tried to create a young artists and young artists and musicians, because we're trying to lean on all those different learning areas that children and students bring to the table. Young authors focuses on our writers, and then young musicians and artists was our artistic people. We had planned something actually at Providence Farm for young artists to submit their pieces to a local artist, and then they would give feedback, and then we would go to Providence Farm and have an outdoor art experience. But then that's when restrictions started to come into play again, and then Providence Farm kind of backed off, and then we're like, okay, we're maybe not this year. But it's something that we can look forward to. And then, you know, Trustee DeGroot, I'm hopeful that we can bring that poetry piece back in too, because there are those kiddos that really love all those pieces. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from trustees? Trustee Croft.
Hi, thank you so much for all of that. That's the first, I think, that we've had that presented all in one place. So that's just a wonderful overview. So I was wondering if you mind if when I tell my friends about it, I can call it Catalyst, Wild and Wacky Ways to Learn.
Yeah.
It's so
Isn't it so?
It's so joyful, and it's nice to see that as, you know, so embraced within the system. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I also, Trustee Croft, I appreciate seeing your little cat behind you. Thank you for that.
Wild and wacky for sure.
Yeah, it matched the whole thing.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you. Thank you again. It was very well presented. I love you. I love the fact that you screen share. It's all good. I know it's how you roll, and they're always fantastic. So it's good
Thank
to
you.
see. So thank you all very much, and all you Catalysts, but thank you very much. And we will move on to 6.3.
Great, thank you.
6.3 is communicating student learning with Glenn Posey, District of our Principal of Instruction and Innovation. So if we could invite him in, please. Oh, there he is. Almost. Welcome.
Hi, Squale, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about communicating student learning, I'll just set up my screen share as well. And Joanne, I'll just get a thumbs up that you're seeing the BEBC intro slide.
We sure are.
All right, fantastic. All right, thanks everyone. So to give you an update of where we're at with our communicating student learning, the ministry this year had planned to release a new reporting order. The work was completed. They surveyed the stakeholder groups across the province, and the feedback was generally mixed across different areas and across the different groups. So it wasn't generally well received. So presently we are waiting on an updated reporting framework that hopefully will be arriving in the next 2 to 3 weeks. The ministry is looking for a September 2023 implementation. And so with that said, I'm going to give you an update of where we're at with our current CSL work in the district. So if we look at the left side of this chart, current K-9 practice, where we're at around our communications is at least 3 written communications for most subject areas were to go home to parents, and then 2 summaries of progress throughout the year. So generally the end of January, early February, those summaries of progress go out, and then again a summative at the end of the year, and in K-9 all using the proficiency scales. And within that, if we hop down to our core competencies for our students, 2 self-reflections go home per year currently, and each of them are attached against the summary of progress. And then in our 10 to 12 space, we're really doing traditional what we've always done. We do 2 formal and 1 informal communication per semester. And then if we look at sort of the future draft where we think this new framework is going to line up and how it lines up with what we are presently doing for the 2023 school year, we expect that the requirement is 2 written communications for each subject currently being studied, and at least 2 other varied communications. And if we look at summary of learning, again, rather than summary of progress, just rebranding it summary of learning, there will be 1 summative report at the end of the year or at the end of the course. For K-9, proficiency scale will be used, and then letter grades and percentages for 10 to 12. Under the core competencies areas for our students, self-reflection 3 times a year as part of the learning updates, and then as part of the final summary of learning. And then there's goal setting 3 times a year to be a part of those learning updates and summary of learning as well. So this is not yet released. What we know for certain will remain from communications is the number of communications, so 2 written communications and 2 other varied, the proficiency scale, K-9, and the letter grade and percentages for 10 to 12. So we know those are a lock, and then there'll be some adjustments around some of these other pieces that are presently showing in the draft. So if we look at CSL, what does it provide to our students and to our parents? The whole model is about giving regular communication to both students and parents and their guardians about how learning is progressing. It's providing information that's meaningful. It's the provision of authentic evidence of learning, and it's the use of that proficiency scale again in K-9. And Nicole and Claire did a nice job speaking a little bit to the importance of moving our students to looking at their learning and metacognitively reflecting on their learning. And this proficiency scale helps us build that capacity as we change our practice and move it forward. So inside of CSL, there's really two main components. We've got points of progress and the summaries of learning. So the points of progress are those ongoing communications that are completed in the rhythm of the learning. So there's not hard set times when these things take place. It's just in the flow. And when there's something of value and importance to capture, then it can be captured and communicated. And then our summary of learning, of course, twice a year right now, and those just go home to give more of a snapshot at mid-year, and then summative at the end of year of how the learning has gone. So what's inside of a point of progress? Well, first of all, it's focused on the learning. It can be communicated through any or all of the various choices. So it can be electronic portfolios such as Ed-Inform or other digital tools. Paper portfolios go back and forth home. Teachers can have face-to-face meetings and phone calls or emails that they document. And it's important that these communications are done in parent-friendly language with little or no educator jargon. The communications inside of a point of progress tend to be more formative rather than summative. And one of the analogies that we throw around all the time is that when the cook tastes the soup in the kitchen, that's formative assessment, because he can still or she can still adjust what's going on. And when the customer tastes that soup, that's summative assessment because it's the end of the line. So that's sort of the way to think about the types of points of progress that go home. So there's 4 criteria for communicating student learning inside of a point of progress. So to have a complete point of progress, it has to first of all have authentic evidence of learning. So that shows the process or the application or the product of the learning. There's a clear description of what the learner is doing that includes the learning intention and goal, and it can include photos, videos, audio, work samples, things like that. And then alongside of that, there's descriptive feedback. And this is where the teacher provides precise information about what the learner is doing well, what needs improvement for that specific area of learning. So it really uses the concept of notice, name, and nurture. And then next steps. And this is where the teacher provides a clear description to the student of what the next steps are for learning so that learning can progress further. And then we want a point of progress to reflect student voice. So it can be student reflections on their learning. Students may include evidence of learning that they capture outside of school time and share. So there's a number of things that we can do to include that student voice, but all 4 of these make up a complete point of progress when we communicate at home. So we'll look at a few examples that are being used out there. So here's an English 9 example with the proficiency scale showing at the top. It's got the competencies listed on the left and then integrates the proficiency on the right. It explains a bit about the task, and then there's room down below for teacher comments. And likely this could be paired with another piece of evidence or a picture or something like that to give you the complete picture around what's happening in the learning. And if I go on to the next one, this is an example of a written email or a paper communication, and this was highlighted as an exercise with a teacher just to show that student voice can be captured, the explanation of the curricular competencies, what's being covered, next steps for growth, all just in a written comment, and that could be done as again in an email or paper communication. And then if we look at an example of a digital portfolio, this is from our Ed-Inform app. At the top, there's the core competency, the content competency, a clear title of what this point of progress is about, the learning intention and description, and the teacher comments and the next steps, student self-reflection, and then evidence of what's gone on in the learning, and then a proficiency scale down at the bottom. So there's some examples of what points of progress look like. And then if we move on to what our summaries of learning look like, here's an example of a summary of learning. You've got lots of space for anecdotal comments, and then you have the proficiency scale listed here on the top of page 2, and then you've got some descriptors for specific subject areas. And that would be our summary of learning. And if we move on to our proficiency scale, I just wanted to go a bit deeper and unpackage what this looks like and some of the ways to consider the proficiency scale as it's replaced our letter grades in that K-9 space. And it's important also to note that on this continuum, it's not intended to be a limiter where only a select few can be in the extending. In theory, all your kids could be proficient or extending in a specific area if they meet the criteria. So I'm just going to walk us through an analogy of the proficiency scale through learning to drive. And so if we look at when someone's learning to drive and they're emerging, they're still reading that handbook. They may or may not have written that test where they can get their learner's license. They have to learn what the markings on the roads are, the signs, merge signs, things like that. And they're really being supported by everyone just to get them through that initial emerging test time. They haven't even touched the steering wheel. So if we moved into developing, at this point, now I've passed my learner's test so that I can actually get behind the wheel. I start to learn about the vehicle. I can actually drive with somebody that's beside me. And they're giving me descriptive feedback, explicit descriptive feedback all the way along about distancing from the curb or distancing from other cars and how to handle different situations. So we're really, they're progressing well, but they're still developing those skills. And then when we get into proficient, I've now passed my practical driving test. I can drive in the vehicle on my own safely, point A to point B and back again. I understand how to check if my tire's low, things like that. So now I've become proficient for being able to drive a vehicle. And then extending is where I'm taking those skills and now maybe I'm driving different types of vehicles, a cargo truck or a B-train tractor trailer or an off-road specialized vehicle. So I'm extending and going deeper with those specific skills. And that would be considered extending. So just an analogy for a way for us, for our students and for our parents to think about how we're applying this new provincial proficiency scale. And if I slide over to our 10 to 12 space, there we're still looking at letter grades and percentages, but there's a real shift in our curriculum over the last number of years where we focus on less on content and more on using content to develop competencies and skills. So the type of assessment we're working towards is called standard-based assessment, and that's where we assess competencies and content in a sort of a combined fashion. So it's more about application and what you can do with the skills and the knowledge and less about straight recall. And we even have some of our 10 to 12 teachers exploring the use of proficiency scale in combination with letter grades and percentages to provide student, better explicit feedback about their learning. So that's where we're at in the 10 to 12 space. And if we review sort of the actions and supports that we've put in place over the last number of years. So if we look at the last 4 years, our learning team has provided support at staff meetings, at PLCs, Ignite and Bites, and non-instructional days. We've had multiple after-school sessions around communicating student learning. We've had a dedicated principal session for supporting CSL in schools, and there's been DPAC presentations around our communicating student learning directions. We have developed a digital reporting portfolio tool. The learning team has offered ad hoc and on-demand sessions for teachers on their request when they needed more information or were looking for support. And we created a CSL website that's available to all our teachers 24/7, and that has samples and videos and a guidebook. And so those are our actions that we've provided and are presently providing. And with that, that takes me to the end of the show. So I will stop the share and come back to the room.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very comprehensive. I do like the car driving analogy. It makes it a little bit easier to figure out. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? See, it was very clear. So thank you so much, Glenn. We appreciate your time and energy coming and sharing with us.
All right, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. We then move on to number 7, business and operations with Mr. Sandquist, our year-end projections.
Thank you. I'll share the screen because it is a document. And then I'll make it large enough that hopefully you can all follow along on it. So this year-end projection has been prepared with information as at April 30th, 2022. So we're getting within 2 months of our fiscal year end. And as we get closer to the end, our information typically becomes more and more accurate. A noted change from the last time I showed you a projection is that we now have approximately $100,000 of funding coming in through the May count, and that is now shown here in the provincial grant. So that has gone up. We've also seen our interest revenues increase with the announcements around Bank of Canada rates. Those are being reflected in our revenues as well. So at this time, we're looking like we're in excess of budget by about $914,000 on the revenue side. On the expenditures, we don't see much change in our salary items, but we do in our illness and vacation replacement for the month of April. So we had a pretty significant amount of illness in the month of April that's reflected in some additional costs. I believe the last time I showed you this number, it was within about $70,000 of budget, and now it's $195,000 projected for budget. We've also had the implementation of the effective April 1st of the casual sick days, and I'm not sure how much of those are now being utilized, but they are going to begin to factor into our expenditures. Employee benefits remain relatively similar to what I had previously shown at $346,000 under budget. Total salaries $444,000 under budget on $68 million. Benefits $346 under budget on $15.5 million. Moving along, I think the one item here really to highlight is in supplies, where we find our fuel and we find our maintenance supplies. Both items, to run the bus fleet right now, if you go to the gas pump, although it is diesel, it is seeing the same cost pressures that we're all seeing personally when we fill up vehicles. It's costing more to run our bus fleet. Right now, that fuel is probably about $100,000 of that amount being over budget, just really significant cost pressures. We've made some adjustments for inflation next year and hope those fuel prices come under control a bit. And another item that I had previously shown as being over, but I now think we're coming in closer to being on track, is utilities. Does appear to be lining up now a little bit more accurately. So with that, the last time I had shown a surplus projection, we were just about exactly the same at about 1.5 million, still roughly 1.5 million, but you've seen some revenues go up and some expenses go up. So still tracking with what we were using at the time that we had created the budget. So I don't know if there's any questions on projection.
Any questions from trustees? Very clear, I think. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice to see it that way. Then we move to our policy.
Yeah. So there were two policies that the board have been required to create this year. The first was accumulated operating surplus, and we have already run that through our committee structure and taken it to the board, and it has been adopted. So that was the one that had the consultation around the use of surplus, and had was a beefed up our existing contingency policy that stated that we would have between 1% and 3% of surplus in contingency. So there was a lot added to that policy. The second one that's been required by the ministry is the financial planning and reporting policy. They call it FPAR. You might hear that, financial planning and reporting, as the acronym, and it has now been required to be in place by the end of this school year. So we're getting close to that. We took the policy to the audit committee on Thursday, and the audit committee had a good review of the policy and what its purpose was and why we're required to have it. But really, it's around accountability, around multi-year planning, and the reporting out of alignment of resources to student success and to achievement results. So how we're going to do that is going to be quite a complex process, but we do need to have a policy that enhances our consultation around multi-year planning. And that can happen in alignment with the current liaison meetings that are currently in place at budget time. It makes sense that they do. And so this is what you see in here is just the shot from the website from the ministry as to how we can comply with the policy. And I'm going to go straight to the policy now. So we have developed a draft, policy 24. It's to provide greater transparency and accountability for the planning and reporting of financial resources managed by the board. It has been required by Ministry of Education and Childcare, and we believe it does align with their policy direction as it's been written. So specifically, it ensures that we adequately plan for core educational programs. So core programs first is what's required out of funds, that we develop a multi-year financial plan, which you've seen. We do have a template. We did a 3-year financial plan that was part of the strategic plan that the superintendent had arranged for all departments to prepare. You saw operations and HR and finance. So we do have that template, and I think we're already on track. It's one of the reasons we did it early. We're to align financial planning with strategic priorities. We've been trying to do that in the budget process by showing the strategic priority that aligns to the budget decision. We need to identify a process of engagement with local community, education partners, First Nations, and BC Nation. So that's a process that we enhanced this year to include our nations, specifically First Nations and BC Nation in our budget consultation. So that can be expanded to now also talk about multi-year planning. And we did talk about multi-year use of surplus this year with those groups. We need to ensure that the budget and multi-year financial plans are prepared in accordance with appropriate applicable legislation, because we will need to be sending these into the ministry. And annually, there needs to be a report towards the alignment of funding with the board's strategic plan, priorities, operational goals, and student education outcomes. That's going to be a complex report to develop, and I think it's going to get better over time, but it's something that there aren't a lot of school districts doing right now, but we all have to have this policy in place and begin to do it. So specifically, that the board will authorize the superintendent, secretary, treasurer to develop the annual and amended budgets and the multi-year financial plan. They'll be compiled and submitted in the form and containing the content specified by the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So that is language straight out of the ministry, that in the form of and containing the content of. They'll prioritize funding for mandated education programs, and where available, support board strategic priorities and operation plans. So complying with the mandated education programs through the School Act, And each year at the February open board meeting, the board will approve the annual budget timelines. So you're already doing that. And in those timelines, there will be a schedule for engagement with all of those partners that need to be included in multi-year financial planning. Oops. Prior to the presentation of the annual budget to the board, there'll be a report provided that will summarize all the input that has been received and identify how it has been considered in the development of the annual budget and multi-year financial plan. We're already doing that. So as we go through our budget presentations, we often give you the history of where we've been and who the board have already met with and how that information has been considered to that point. And then the final part, the board authorizes superintendent, secretary, treasurer to monitor financial reporting of the annual budget. That's what we just did with the year-end financial projection. And those will be starting in December when it's appropriate to begin, when we begin to be able to develop trend patterns. Quarterly financial reports will be compiled and submitted to the ministry in the form and containing the content specified by the Ministry of Education and Childcare. That's work that Erin does every quarter. She does a quarterly financial report called the Government Reporting Entity Report that doesn't come to the board as it's unaudited and it's interim, but it is an accounting of where we're at that particular time. And this is the tricky part. Would be the board will communicate its progress towards the alignment of funding and resources with the strategic priorities, operational goals, and student outcomes. So that is a report that we began last year, again, a bit ahead of this requirement, knowing that it was coming. We developed a financial statement discussion and analysis report. Well, we're going to need to extend that a little bit beyond the first one that we've done in this year, which will begin to align how those resources were aligned with the strategic priorities and how those outcomes, how the financial results align with all those other goals. And that is the summary of the draft policy that was reviewed at audit committee. And we're hoping can move forward to the board for recommendation to the board.
Sounds like a whole bunch more work for you, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for developing that. Would somebody like to move that motion?
I'd like to move that motion. Where is here that the Board of Education and Business Committee recommend policy 24, financial planning or reporting, to the board for adoption.
And a seconder.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. And any discussion on the motion? We'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sandquist. That was very straightforward and clear. And like I said, I think it's going to make a lot more work for you. And thank you again in advance.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, I did have a question. I was trying to sneak it in before we called. May I ask Jason now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that flexibility. Jason, I just noticed that it says that, of course, the plan prioritizes mandated educational programs and where available may support the board's strategic priorities. But then, of course, you go down and reporting requires that we talk about how we're meeting our strategic priorities. I just, I don't know, do you have any insight on that? It seems like strategic priorities come a distant second. However, we have to report on them. There seems some dissonance there. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I think we always have funding available beyond the mandated priorities, but we are required to do those first, which I think is just to add the clarity that resources first go to the things that are required, such as school act or collective agreement, class size and composition. I mean, there's some things that board doesn't have flexibility on. So it's just to provide that clarity and it's, again, language that we're pulling out of the ministry.
Right. I figured that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I missed you.
Not at all.
We will move on then to committees and the highlights of our advisory committee. It was, as always, informative. It's nice to get together with our groups and be advised and have a little chat. There will be no advisory in June. So that's just that highlight. And other than that, if we could have a motion to adjourn, please. Trustee DeGroot and Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.